The Bram Weinstein Show on Washington's new home for sports, ESPN 630.
Hey, babies. Hey, babies. Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone. If I owned the Nationals, I'd get Juan Soto signed, just like Bradley.
Oh, you don't know that.
Hello, everybody. Happy Monday to you. I am still flummoxed by the outrage directed at the Nationals for offering a player the largest guaranteed contract in terms of total money in the history of the sport, and people are literally mad at them, saying they're insulting Juan Soto.
I wouldn't say insulting Juan Soto, but I would say it is a dumb game to play when you offer him a contract that's not worth what he's worth each year. I would say it's a dumb PR move once again by the Nats. They do this all the time.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely.
You think this is a PR stunt?
Yes.
That
Someone got frustrated at the negotiating table and decided to do this. It was a really dumb decision because what happened last night, a report comes out saying they're going to offer him one more contract.
Of course they are.
Right.
Why would they be talking to him now unless they were going to do it?
Right.
Let me ask this question.
Sure.
With 2 years left on his contract beyond this season, what's going on?
Correct. I would agree with you on
why, and the whole they're going to trade him in the next 2 weeks. Why would they do that?
Yeah. No. This is where I think you and I can always come to blows at who's right on the contract and who's wrong on the contract. But the situation is patently ridiculous at the moment.
How did it ramp up to 11?
Right.
If this was next summer at this time and they're going, listen, we don't want to go through a whole year of you not signing a contract because you're a year away. We want to know where you stand and then we're going to make a decision about you. I would get it. But we're not there.
Yeah.
And that's why I don't get this on so many levels. Like, they're trying to sell the team. Why is this ownership so invested in trying to get this deal done now on behalf of somebody else? Why is he talking to them about this, which partially leads me to believe maybe he wants a contract now. I don't really totally get why we're here and why it ramped up to rhetoric of, well, fine, if you don't take it, we're going to trade you. They have him under control for 2 more years. Yep. It makes no sense to do this right now.
Yeah.
None of it really does.
I think overall, this is the most frustrating part about this weekend, because I'm of your belief that these teams are really a public trust. You are responsible for paying the bills, but at the end of the day, you own an entity that ultimately will affect the area more than you and will be here when you're gone, essentially,
yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And my whole thought process of this weekend was, why are you guys making the decision on this?
Right.
Because you aren't going to be here. I would also stretch things to Mike Rizzo. You're only guaranteed to be here 1 more year too, buddy.
Yeah,
I don't really understand what's going on with this.
Clearly marching orders are coming. Rizzo, I don't think Rizzo would be pressuring to do this on his own.
Right.
And also Rizzo is, while he probably has a lot of power, in this particular case, you have to go to ownership and say, do we approach the guy that's going to be the highest paid player in terms of guaranteed money ever now? So he's not doing this rogue on his own. So it's one of two things. Either the learners, for some reason, want to do this as they go out the door, or Soto himself is getting a little uncomfortable, but is saying, I know you have my rights for a couple of years. Let's settle this now. And I think that's a good thing, actually, because that actually reads to me that he does want to stay here. Right. That said, in the end, okay, well, if you want to stay here, why in the world would you turn down something that makes you the highest paid player of all time? That doesn't read right to me. And everybody who keeps pointing out the annual per, average salary, I'm like, but this money's guaranteed. This isn't an NFL contract. He's going to get it, whether he gets all of it right now or gets all of it in his mid-30s when he shouldn't be making $45 million a year or whatever the number is. He's going to get it. He gets to set a legacy here. That was an offensive contract offer? I don't think it was at all.
I don't think anyone called that offensive. But
yeah, I mean, the pushback to it was oh my God. People were just why would he sign that? Why would he sign that?
Well,
it's the richest contract in the history of the sport. What do you mean, why would he sign it?
It's mainly the eye roll at what the learners did here, though, because that's who leaked it. And it's saying, it was even the presentation by Ken Rosenthal that irked me. It was, Nationals offer him a $440 million contract.
Uh-huh. True.
You didn't. Yes, true. But you didn't see the years until you clicked on the Athletic article that said 15 years.
15 years.
You don't know what the bidding war is going to look like for him because somebody will hand him $35 to $40 million a year
in 2+ years.
Correct. No,
right?
Absolutely.
So
yes.
if you're ripping up what this is now, you do have to take into account that even if he just goes to arbitration, he's going to make a lot less next year than what that annual number is.
Right.
So you're removing that part of it. Remember that part of it.
Yeah.
You're removing that part of it. So there is some accounting here that needs to be, in fairness to them, like the Nationals, they are willing to rip up the current situation by which he is under team control for 2 years where he won't make that average number. They don't have to do that.
Right.
They don't. He's making 17 now. I read by arbitration next year he'd probably get 21.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
So that's a lot less than what he would be making if he signed this right now. So it removes that. It gives him stability. So what's the final offer going to be? 14 years that number? 13 years that number? Like, if they're committed to giving that number, it will be bigger than what Trout got, right? So he gets to say, I got the biggest guaranteed deal, and then it ups the annual value into the low to mid 30s. Would that get it done?
They want that contract to be with a 5. They always have. They want a $500 million contract.
So they want 50. Would he do 15 for $500 million?
Maybe. I think maybe that would get the job done. You get the biggest, not only the longest, you get the biggest deal of all time. I just think everyone has to remember who we're negotiating with here. And that's by we, I just mean the public, essentially. And it's Scott Boras.
I understand.
Scott Boras has no interest in ever signing on with anybody. So I think what happened here was the Nationals got emotional and then leaked what they offered, and then it sends everyone to a fervor. Now Juan's answering questions as we speak right now about
but he has to
on.
answer a question. Why would you not take the biggest guaranteed contract? And his answer to that today was, that's not my choice. Well, actually, Juan, it is. It is your choice. Your agent works for you. You don't work for him. And if you want that contract, then you can say yes to it. He's advising you it's not the best you can get. He might be right about that.
He might be saying, do you want to be the highest paid player in the MLB? Juan says yes, and he's going, all right, well, that's not Trout's number.
Right.
Very well could be. I mean, and I don't know what Juan wants, but I'm going to guess he's thinking he could get Trout money.
Right. But Trout signed this deal. He got $426. When that thing expires, he's going to be at a point in his career where, hopefully, for his sake, he is productive enough that he can get another contract. There's no guarantee with that because he'll be in his 30s.
Right.
And go look at Albert Pujols or other hitters. It's not standard at that age that you are able to command something like that. Pitchers seem to be different. I don't like this comparison to Scherzer. Pitchers are different.
That was Boras. I mean,
that was Boras, but that was also a 2-year deal.
Right.
At the end of it, they didn't offer him 10 years, $400 million. It's a 2-year deal on the off chance that he's got 2 years of Cy Young ability left in him. They may or may not even be right about that at his age, but that was the price that they paid to get that done. And people comparing that to a long-term stability, you get to build a legacy, and oh, by the way, get a contract that's going to be, at least in total money, likely not to be topped by anybody I can think of that's coming through the pipeline right now. Who is actually playing? Because I heard this a lot the other day, too. A lot of people saying, like, well, the salaries always go up. That's not really true.
Right.
That actually isn't true.
I agree with you.
Go look at what A-Rod got from the Rangers 20 years ago, and you'll actually see there are a very small number of players who have come since then that have reached that number.
Sure.
Right? So I don't sit there and go, there's 5 more guys behind him. This isn't like the quarterback thing where, like, Mahomes got this, and then Allen got that, and then Lamar's going to get this, and then Deshaun got that. Who are the 4 other Juan Sotos that we're talking about that are going to get $500 million?
Right.
I don't necessarily believe that that's the case. I think the Nationals are trying to make a case here like, dude, in total value, you are the highest paid player ever. The money is guaranteed. We could stop this nonsense now with you getting asked questions about your future until the end of time. We can end this and give you generational wealth and give you the biggest contract ever. I don't think that is in any way, shape, or form insulting at all. Zero. Do I find it insulting at all to put that in front of them? And is it maybe a year or two longer than they're comfortable with because of the annual value? Sure. All right, I'll hear people out on that. But I just felt like the backlash and calling it like, even as you put it, like almost like a PR type of thing. I don't think you kid around by putting a number like that in front of somebody. I even said this last December. I was like, damn, they're offering him $350 now.
Sure.
Like 3 years in advance, they're offering it to him, and he's scoffing at that, saying, well, that's not the number. And everyone said, well, that's not what he's going to get. They have upped that by almost $100 million, and he is still not taking it?
Which tells
you, though,
whatever they're negotiating is working. That they have almost upped it, and nothing has changed. In fact, he had his worst first half of the season. Granted, he's heating up now and looks to be back to form, but he didn't look so hot there for 2 or 3 months, and we're all going, I don't know, is this just a slump, or how good is he going to be? And all of a sudden he's back, but it does tell you that first offer, while we all kind of knew it was just a, hey, we need you to turn this down, does tell you they're still trying to meet whatever
the demand.
That number's going to be. Yes. And so I'm with you. My reaction is not that's not a bad offer whatsoever. Because even on that first $350 I said, okay, what are the details of this? And we found out no deferred money. No deferred money again on this deal. I like where things are heading, but it is still once again how the Nats like to throw this out there. And he's not the first player to have this happen to him. It happened with Harper multiple times. It happened with Ian Desmond during the season a couple of times. It's happened with Rendon.
I don't mind a team throwing a little up and in when we're talking about money like this and going, I'm going to tell people publicly that you're not interested in this, and let's see how you handle something like that.
I just think
shuffle at us if you really want to at the plate, but it's not like we're offering you the Cousins deal. We're not here.
Here's the thing, though. There's no reason.
You're saying no to $440 million? And you're embarrassed that we told the public that you're saying no to $440 million? I don't know, man.
This goes back to the beginning of our conversation, though. There was no reason to have this come out on a Saturday before the All-Star game. So now Soto's sitting there in L.A. where it's supposed to be a good time, and he's answering these questions. Once again, I'm more pissed off at the PR of all of it, honestly. And I don't know who's playing who.
Someone calculated, and they knew this. He's going to show up at the All-Star game. This is what it's going to be about.
Yes.
And it's a tough question to answer for him now.
It was his bobblehead day on Saturday.
But it should be a tough question to answer.
Right.
It should be.
Sure.
Why don't you want that?
But here's the thing. Let's do this next year where is one full, where you get to, if you're going to trade for Juan Soto, you get him for 2 playoff runs.
Right. Could they have been silent about this, said nothing, and gone, listen, we clearly aren't seeing eye to eye right now. You're not going anywhere. So smile, play right field, hit a bunch of home runs, deal with a crappy record. We'll talk about this in the offseason. And again, if we can't see eye to eye, then we might have to have a discussion about what your future is here. Because the idea of them trying to garner the right trade for him now also seems unlikely and really short-sighted by the Nationals.
It seems rash.
So it seems really rash. So it's why I don't believe they will trade him in the next couple of weeks.
No.
I don't think that's happening.
I think the fervor that happened over the weekend, especially of every outlet then, MLB, Buster Olney, The Athletic,
everybody.
Everyone all of a sudden does who are the best trade partners. Mm-hmm. You don't get that deal. You don't get a better deal at the deadline than you would in the winter meetings.
Offseason, in the winter meetings, correct.
And so
I think that they talk about this until December.
Right.
And then at that point, we may have a new owner.
Well, see, okay,
right,
so this brings me into my whole tinfoil hat theory here, is who they're talking to bringing in not going to be of the Steve Cohen variety, that they do not want to spend this much money on a player, and that maybe there are these back channel talks of, hey, I know I'm going to be the new owner here, but can you guys kind of off this guy before I step on? That way when I'm stepping on as the owner, I'm not going to have the first thing I do is trade away the best player in the game.
But also the new owner could be on the hook for that contract, so they've got to be comfortable with that, because what if he said yes?
Well, that's what I'm getting to. That's what I'm getting at. That they're essentially going, I'm comfortable up to a point.
We want you to figure this out now.
And we need you to take the hit on it, because my first piece of legacy for this team can't be trading away the most beloved player of the franchise.
I would hear them, and I'd also hear the learners say, do you want to buy the team or not? Because we're not
I would agree.
If you're out because you don't want to sign this generation's Babe Ruth, well, that's kind of on you, and that's kind of not our problem.
Sure.
So that's where I don't understand the motivation of why are the learners so hell-bent on trying to do this right now when it doesn't make any sense for so many reasons. One, they're likely not the owners. Two, there's too much time left on his contract to really be that overly concerned about it.
Right.
So what's that's the thing. It's always the backdrop that I can never really totally get, and I don't really totally get what's going on here, which got me circling back to, is this Soto kind of saying, at least to Boris, hey, I know you like to get to free agency, but I kind of want to get this done now. And if they're willing to talk about numbers in the 400 to 500 million range
in July, by the way,
why don't we just do that then? And of course, Boris is going to stick them up for everything possible.
Right.
It is unusual that they're even. So there is that too. Boris has a history of not engaging in these things.
That's right.
He is engaging in this.
Yep.
So that does lead me to believe this might be coming from Soto saying, and that might be the good news, I really would like to stay.
Right.
Do what you do, right? But get it done.
Yeah.
Because I don't, in the past, when he has people like this, there's not even a conversation about it. He's like, we'll see you when we see you, and we'll get it done when we get it done.
You also rewind to the Steven Strasburg first extension. Remember, Strasburg actually signed for a little less money because he was hurt, but he could have demanded a lot more on the open market, but he liked it here, signed for a little less, got a little bit longer of a term. And if you remember that press conference, Boris was sitting up there, and Boris looked like he had seen a dead animal or something.
He never wants to take what's
because
less.
That's not his style. He would never want to take less.
So maybe this is happening again where he's reading the room, his client's telling him, hey man, I actually do want to talk about this now.
Right.
And clearly, because they're negotiating, he's playing hardball with the Nationals. The Nationals just threw one up and in back at them.
Yeah.
And said, okay, we just offered you more than what Mike Trout got.
Right.
You're saying no to it. Explain that to everybody.
His counter is going to be, well, I'm not making as much per year. But I'm just saying, that's the counter. That's the counter. But here's the other thing.
It's guaranteed money.
Here's the other thing ownership-wise that I think. I think the learners care about their perception on the way out, because it hasn't been great the past couple years. They had to tear down the team. I'm sure their hope was to, I told you this, I think they were going to sell the team going into that offseason of the World Series, but they won. So it became this whole, well, we might as well reap these benefits, right? And now all of a sudden, they don't have this loving, cheery feeling leaving this team with someone else. They had to trade the best player in franchise history, the most beloved franchise player retired on their watch, which there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
But they had to trade Trey Turner, maybe Mike Rizzo's best trade chip of all time, and now they're watching their baseball team be the worst in the majors, essentially. Yeah. And there's Juan Soto hanging over everything. I think they care about their legacy on the way out, because they're looking at it going, man, we had this team so good for a decade, but these last 2 years, it's really fallen down. What if we lock that guy up and say to everybody, that's our parting gift. We've got this guy for you now for the next 10 to 12 to 13 years.
He will play his career here.
And now every time he steps on the field, you go, well, at least the learners left that. At least they left him with that contract. I think that's another factor of why this might be happening midseason, because I don't think they should even be having these negotiations.
I don't either. I'm surprised by it.
Yeah,
there's so many reasons why this makes no sense to be happening right now.
Yes.
Which is why I've always come back to, for some reason, I think Soto actually is initiating some of this and would actually prefer to get something done now. That's where I landed. I don't know that, but I don't see why Boris is motivated to do these negotiations now, and I don't understand why the learners would necessarily be, motivated to do it. But they're willing to take part in it, and that's the other weird part. Like, they could just give him what he wants because it's not their money to spend, and that's the other strange part of this. Yeah. Like, that doesn't make any sense. And the last thing I want to say is Doug Glanville's going to join us in a couple of minutes from ESPN to talk a lot about this now, but it was mainly to come on talk about the home run derby. But because of this, we'll ask him about this. The last thing I do want to say on this is this: in the case of Harper, I think it's pretty clear he just didn't want to be here anymore for whatever reason. Like that. And what they ended up offering him, while I get it on the deferred money part, which was, I can nitpick that big time.
Of course.
It was a market value deal that they offered him, right? And he just turned it down, like he did. Yeah. And so I don't know what you're supposed to do about that. That's what he did. In this particular case with this particular player, I have a different feeling about him. Not that I don't think Harper's great, and I wish he would have stayed. But this guy feels like Babe Ruth. And I do think, on the whole, and to Boris's case and maybe Soto's case in some ways, there is part of me that goes, I really think you have to do everything within your power to retain this person, because I think he's that special. And he is your Ovechkin. And I think you will regret not having him as part of your organization. He is a person that's going to, I think, short of injuries that you don't know, set a legacy for you that probably will be unmatched.
Yep.
He is on a pace that he is going to break records, and he's going to have one of the greatest careers of all time in the sports history. And I don't think you can let that person go, especially prematurely, which doesn't make it, that's the other part that doesn't make any sense about why this ramped up to 11 over the weekend. Well, we threw you this money. Well, now we're going to listen to trades. Why?
Why can't you talk about money again in the offseason? Why can't you let the next owners, why can't you, this is what I actually think is my number one thing, and I know we got to take a break. Why can't you just say, we're at an impasse, we're going to let the next owners handle that?
But we still want you to stay.
Yes.
We still want to stay in touch with you.
Yes.
Clearly, we can't get a deal done right now, but we value you too much.
Right.
We're not going to trade you. And, oh, by the way, you got 2 years left here.
Yes.
There's no rush.
We felt it was important for our team moving forward to, in good faith, try to get you to stay here. And now we're going to let the next set of owners.
He had a weird first half of the season. And you know when things changed for him? When everyone revealed that they were in contract talks.
That's right.
That's actually when things turned around.
You're right.
So, there's part of me that goes, his actions say he's under a lot of pressure because of this. He'd rather this be over and not deal with it anymore. And if that's the case, great, let's get this done. Scott, 440 is a big number, man. It's the biggest number ever. You get to crow about it until the end of time. It's not a bad number. It's not a junk number. Like, come on. They're not doing Kirk Cousins on you right now. Like, come on. Like, let's talk. I think we're in a middle ground now.
Here's the thing. I think they're actually really close.
Probably.
It's getting a little ugly because Scott's Scott.
Scott.
And Rizzo's a proud guy. Yeah. And something's happening here where one got really frustrated.
We need somebody did the Frau Farbissina and yelled Scott.
That's
right. Scott! All right, Doug Glanville's going to join us next. Brad watch the show, ESPN 630, Sports Capital. All right, welcome back. Tonight on these airwaves, you'll be able to hear ESPN Radio's coverage of the Home Run Derby. You'll be able to hear the ESPN Radio coverage of the All-Star Game as well tomorrow night. And on it, Doug Glanville, longtime major leaguer, one of my former colleagues from ESPN. Doug, it is a pleasure having you here. I haven't talked to you in a while. How are you?
Yeah, Brian, it's been a minute. It's great to connect. Too long, but glad.
Thanks for doing this today. Obviously, I'll talk to you about the Home Run Derby in a minute, but as you may know here, there's a literal public freakout about a star player turning down what would be the biggest guaranteed money contract in the history of the game. Right. What is just your general reaction to the news that Juan Soto turned down $440 million?
I didn't think it was about the money so much as it was about where he thinks the organization is going, and being that you are one of the greatest players in the game, he wants to leverage that as much as possible, and not just for economic leverage, but just opportunity leverage. Where are you going to play? What's the commitment of that organization to win, not just next year, but every single year? And when you play and you're at that level, and you've produced as he has, you want to take that. You want to take that ability to leverage it into something where you can say, okay, this is my home, and the commitment is around it. So you look at Dodgers teams that are perennial contenders, he's earned that right at this point to at least weigh those options.
Yeah. And if the Nationals counter and say, hey, remember when you won a World Series with us a couple of years ago? Don't you trust us to put teams around you that you can win with? What would you say back if you were him?
I'd say, well, we're in last place right now. We're in last place right now. So, it's more, there's teams that we know economically every single year they're in first or floating around first place. That's different than, win one year, rebuild over the next 3, win maybe another year. And, you look at someone like Shohei Ohtani and Mike Trout, greatest players on earth, and, they have a lot of trouble winning. Trout's been to the playoff once. And if you're a star where you could kind of call your own shots, why would you want to be in a situation that you felt you might be Mike Trout and have all these seasons where you can't get to the postseason?
Yeah.
So that I think that's the question. Like, yeah, I know there's loyalty, and I grew up a fan of the '70s. I wanted all my favorite players seemed to be in one place, but unfortunately, from the standpoint of consistency and long-term relationships with organizations, that's hard to come by.
Yeah, to your point about Trout and Ohtani, though, that's not a team that's lacking means or wherewithal for some reason it's not working. They're willing to pay people to go there. They're just they're not winning for whatever reason.
Right, but that's still the bottom line. For a guy who can command that, and look, Soto's a guy you can drop into any lineup on earth and be like, yeah, he's going to start over whoever. That's how good he is. So if you're that player, you want to make sure is locked in on that, and maybe that's what Soto wants to see. Maybe he's like, all right, let's see what moves you're going to make. Are we going to just be rebuilding the next 2 years? Or are we, going to poised to make big splashes? It's a waiting game, and he seems to have the upper hand right now.
So a lot of this for us too locally, it's confusing the timing of it because, like, as you know, the team might get sold. So why they would make this commitment, what is going to be the past ownership, make this commitment now makes no sense. He also has 2 years left under team control. So I can't figure out why this is even happening right now. Can you?
At least look and consider everything, because you might be able to get value in all these teams that have farm systems that could possibly afford a Soto, or at least afford a Soto and still be able to put other pieces around him. I see a lot of this flushing out, not taking very long, because it's going to be very difficult, as an organization, if a player is wanting to be somewhere else, or at least the pot's being stirred and everybody's considering all offers. So, so it's not necessarily, okay, I have to do it right now, but you're always weighing that against value. And teams right now are trying to win in 2022. What's it worth to them? And the Nationals are certainly considering. They're going to have to consider that.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, too, though, they're better served, no matter what happens over the next couple of weeks, not trading him right now. I mean, they have the off season, right? I mean, can't they go to the winter meetings and go, we're still at a stalemate, and therefore, now we're going to really talk about trying to make a deal?
Then they can, and it seems like Soto, at least from what I've seen of today, is thrilled, I guess, that it's out there.
Yeah,
we saw this with Aaron Judge, right? Aaron Judge goes into different contract situation, but you go in, and once that becomes public domain of, okay, there's a stalemate, or then a lot of things backfill the information, but you're working against time, which is why a lot of players say, hey, I don't want to negotiate during the season, because things get misconstrued and things get confused. And maybe today I'm mad, or today this happened, but that doesn't necessarily reflect how this will end. So, but that's the way it is. And there was a reason why salaries went into the public domain, because there was a lot of hiding of the real information. Players weren't being told the truth as what their value was. Like, oh, you're the highest player on the team, and then he was like the 10th highest. So that became part of the Players Association, the union, to say we need these figures public, because then we know have the transparency of what people are making. But the flip side is the public is more involved in your negotiations.
yeah, and and I get that, and I could see where him answering questions why he's turning down the most guaranteed money in the history of the sport is difficult to probably explain. But secondarily, like, again, on the timing, the weird part to me is, at least, and we've had a lot of experience with Scott Boras, because he's had a lot of high-profile clients here, Bryce Harper, Max Scherzer, Steven Strasburg, et al. Right. Some have stayed, some haven't. Like, he notoriously doesn't do these things early, and yet here they are at least talking about it, which does make me feel a little bit like Soto wants to engage, or am I reading that wrong?
I mean, it's definitely possible that players, when you have a rough season, as the Nats have had this year, and you're the star of that team, and you guys see all the injuries and everything happening and people leaving, and Rendon and Scherzer, whoever. Yeah, if you can be in a position to say, all right, are we committing as an organization, to win going forward, or are there other opportunities, and how can you make that happen? Yeah, so I can see a player posing that when you have the leverage that a Soto does have, to say, a lot of these young players are getting locked up for these long-term deals, and the difference between Soto and say like Acuna Jr. or Ozzie Albies or whoever is that he has more body of work to go off of.
Yeah.
And then you look at his numbers and you see these Babe Ruthian statistics, right? 427 career on base percentage. He's never had an on base percentage less than 400 in a season. I mean, it's absurd what he's doing, and so now you can at least point to something and make the decision, and it's the tough one, but you just don't want a disgruntled star, and you don't want a situation where you're truly still 3 years out, and you're going to have this guy kind of, carrying kind of a broken train.
Yeah. As you look at the Nationals, if you put yourself in his shoes for a moment, and you were on teams that, at least early in your career, that were highly competitive and winning, and now all of a sudden it's obviously a very different team, and they're publicly saying, give us some time, we're going to fix this. What would you want to hear from Mike Rizzo and whoever the new owner is to make you feel assured that they are going to put together a franchise that will allow you to compete?
Well, that's definitely showing like how you're going to do it. And that's the tough thing as an owner, because you may not feel you want to reveal certain things, but this is your star, and if he's really your franchise, then franchise with that comes a little bit more shared information. And I'm not saying like revealing great secrets, but just the way that how are you going to build this? Like, can you get these players here? When Joe Madden went to the Angels as a manager, there was a lot of belief that he could bring a lot of talent with him because we had the cachet, and maybe to a certain degree he got a couple of guys, but it wasn't enough, right? And that cost him his job. So, and that's why players might put in. If you're Carlos Correa, for example, and you're in Minnesota, and you put in an interesting contract, we have like an option every year, right? So
yeah,
so it's like, okay, so there's things like that. You can be very creative and give someone a way out or waive a trade clause, whatever it is. But I get it. Like, I played on a lot of teams that weren't very good, all right? And it's not a lot of fun every year to go in and just be looking at the Braves back every year. And I don't care if you're the 20th man on the roster or you're Mike Trout. You're just trying to figure out how you can control that situation as much as possible. And it's in the hands of the organization on how they're going to spend money and how they're developing players. So if you get to the point where you can look at an organizational opportunity holistically, and believe me, if you have a guy like Boris, these things. they do that level of research. So, and in the meantime, it might be a little bit of a game of chicken, but that's what negotiating is.
Yeah. All right, last one locally, and then I'll get to the event tonight. What's your just general sense of what's happening with the Baltimore Orioles right now?
Well, I happen to be fortunate to do 2 of their games this past week. Their pitching is really good, particularly their bullpen. As of a couple of days ago, they're 5th. They're certainly a top bullpen, and they have pitchers for everything, every scenario coming out of the pen. They have guys that are having career years. That's been impressive. The other thing is they catch the ball. They play defense. And, they're in the right position, but they're also closing out plays. So that's, to me, the main aspect of what's made them different. You have starters that, I remember Jordan Lyles, I think, went 7 innings or went into the 7th. They can go deep if they need to, and they can set up their bullpen well. So that's 1 and 2 right there. And so, yes, getting some offense or guys, whether Mancini or Cedric Mullins or, there's guys that are starting to pick it up as well. So, they look like a really good team. Like, I watched them, and I was like, impressed with how solid they were considering 110 losses a year ago. So, pitching and defense, and they're right now playing very well in those 2 aspects.
I mean, at some point too. I mean, this is a different scenario because they're different market size and all that. But like, they have one of those ridiculously low payrolls. If this somewhat continues here into the second half of the season and wherever it ends up, either wild card or close to it. do they feel like a team that would then go, okay, now we're going to spend and get a couple guys in here to help boost this thing a little bit?
Well, the problem, I think, for the Orioles is you have 4 real legit teams ahead of them. So they just happen to be in a division where everybody's good and has been to the postseason and willing and all these things to spend the money. So the big question is not, or if you're serious about really going into the postseason, it's not that you can just spend a little bit more. It's that are you going to go to the level where you're going to compete with the Yankees or the Red Sox? That's most likely not happen. Not only the money required, but the level of personnel you have to bring in when you're all competing for that at the trade deadline. So that's their issue, and it's a big question for front offices to make that decision, because you're saying, well, do we give up prospects and all that for these guys that aren't quite to the level that they're going to sustain? Are we going to get, maybe they get they have Rutschman, but you get Wilson Contreras type of really good two-way catcher. So that's the problem. They're in a division that makes that equation very complicated, because the top 4 teams in there are all in, and you have to leapfrog all these guys to get there. If they were in the Central, it would be a different story. I think they'd see themselves in much more striking distance to make splashes.
All right, last thing. Give me your sense of what you expect tonight. I mean, this is a great historic event, and we've got stars in it. So what do you expect to see tonight?
It's exciting. What a field of players. And my favorite right now is actually Juan Soto, because it seems like he has something to prove. There's kind of a chip going on. He had a low batting average early on, starting to heat up, and an unbelievable July, and the power's coming back. So I see him. It's very focused. I remember last year, the 500-foot home run, but he also was saying how he wants to hit the longest opposite field home run. He's like, anybody can pull the ball, right? Well, not anybody, but in that field of players. So I'm fascinated to see that he seems to have the most at stake for some reason, other than Alonso, right, who's the champion. So I'm looking for explosions, and you have Acuna Jr. and Schwarber, who I got to cover him, who's just a prolific home run hitter. He hits more home runs than Sewell. So I see it a lot of fun. You see youth in the game, you see experience in Albert Pujols, and I'm just going to watch the show and somewhere in there call it at the same time.
We look forward to it. I look forward to hearing you on our airwaves tonight. The Home Run Derby will be heard right here on ESPN 630, the Sports Capital. Doug Glanville, John Shambi will be part of the coverage tonight. Doug, a pleasure. Thank you for coming on today.
Okay, Brian. Yeah, I appreciate it, man. Thank you.
That's Doug Glanville. You can watch, obviously, the Home Run Derby as well on ESPN tonight. All right, so he likes our guy. Nice hometown call there for him. He likes our guy tonight.
Real quick before we take a break, the bracket looks like this, and this is why I actually agree with him with Juan Soto. Your first matchup is Kyle Schwarber, 1-8. He's going up against Albert Pujols. Pujols has got added here because he's the legend, right? There's a new rule that you can add one of these guys.
Yeah.
Schwarber probably moves on there. Soto then goes up against Jose Ramirez. Jose Ramirez is fine. Soto's been doing this before. He beat Shohei last year. I think Soto moves on. Corey Seager, that has a matchup with Rodriguez up in Seattle. Doesn't matter how that goes. Then it's Pete Alonso versus Acuna. I think Acuna could take out Pete Alonso, which then opens up the door for Juan Soto to win this thing. It will be Soto versus Acuna in the championship. So he'd have to go through old friend Kyle Schwarber probably, but the matchups here look like they could be really fun, and Soto's definitely got a shot. He's got a path to it.
What time is coverage tonight?
7 o'clock is our pre-event start, and then 8 o'clock is when it actually all gets
and it's out in
underway.
LA, so it'll be 5 p.m. when they're hitting balls, so the sun's going to start getting weird out in Los Angeles if you can see through the smog.
I was going to say, I hope they get through traffic for that.
That's right. We'll see who's the early arrivees today. That's right. 5 o'clock start, Home Run Derby, Chavez Ravine. Good luck with that.
I hope you're out there now.
No kidding. No kidding.
Yeah.
All right, we'll take a quick break. Later this week also is the ESPYs, and one of their spokespeople, Katie Sweet's going to join us next, as they're getting set to honor the great Dick Vitale for the Jimmy V Award for Perseverance. We'll hear a little bit about that next. Ray, watch the show. He's at 6:30 Sports Capital. This is a big week for programming for ESPN this week. The Home Run Derby's tonight. The All-Star Game is tomorrow out in Los Angeles. And then the annual ESPY Awards will be airing on ABC, 8 o'clock Wednesday night. And Katie Sweet, who's the Senior Director of Brand Communications is from the V Foundation, is going to join us now to discuss what I think is going to be an incredible night, because they're going to honor Dick Vitale with the Arthur Ashe Courage Award for his perseverance and positive outlook amidst his cancer diagnosis. This all, of course, dates back to the legendary basketball coach Jim Valvano, who gave one of the most inspiring speeches you'll ever see that still to this day is extremely powerful, and I'm sure will get a lot of airtime Wednesday on ESPN. Hi, Katie. How are you?
Great. How are you doing?
I'm great. So I think obviously Dickie V was an easy choice here. His battles with cancer have been public, and he has fought through it, and he got back on the air, and then he had to take another leave, and then he went back on, and he's been a legendary figure at the network since the late 1970s. Can you tell me a little bit about just the thought and your feeling about watching Dick Vitale receive this honor?
Absolutely. And, Dick Vitale, let me just say, is he's not a man, he's a machine. Like, he just, overcomes cancer, never misses a beat with continuing to fundraise. He's just absolutely phenomenal. So he has been a friend of the foundation for a very long time. He helped Jim Valvano up onto that stage to give that very famous "Don't Ever Give Up" speech. And, here we are 29 years later, kind of coming full circle, and Dick's going to stand up there and give what I am sure will be another iconic speech. But we're just looking forward to honoring someone who has been there from the beginning and given so much back to the foundation, to cancer research, to kids battling cancer. He's just done a phenomenal job.
I think the amazing part of that, the Valvano speech, and this is kind of legend, when I was working in Bristol, people talked about this often, that not only did Dick help Jim onto the stage because he was so ill at the time, he wasn't even sure he'd be able to make it to the speech, but he ended up speaking for like 30 minutes. And I don't think anyone knew he was going to do that. Isn't that right? Like that wasn't planned that way.
No, not at all. They were flashing 30 seconds at some point in the very beginning, and Jim just said, I got stuff to say. So you sit back, listen, and then he gave this speech that, even though it's 29 years old, the thing that I find so amazing is you could play it right now. And, of course, if you look at the screen, you can tell it's an older speech. But if you looked away or you just listened to the speech, you couldn't even tell. Like, it's just such a speech that will live for ages. And I listen to it multiple times a year, and I laugh every time, I think every time, and I cry every time, just like he says to do. And, every time you listen to it, it's like the first time you've heard it all over again.
The other one in recent years that really touched me specifically, because I had the great fortune of working with Stuart Scott on a number of shows, some years ago. Do you have any memories of Stuart Scott and the time that he got up on the stage and accepted the honor once it became public that he was fighting cancer?
Absolutely. I also think that's one of those iconic speeches. I think it was particularly moving as he was also so ill. I believe the story is that he left the hospital to come give this speech. And just like Jim, didn't know if he was going to be able to get up there, but it was so important to him to be able to give that message, to tell people that even if you lose your battle with cancer, you actually don't lose, because you beat cancer by how you live. And I just think that's something that resonates with people. And, we celebrate Stuart's life as a sportscaster, but also it's that legacy that he left of fighting cancer. And so, we also have the Stuart Scott Fund at the V Foundation in his honor to fight disparities in cancer outcomes. So he's also another speech that I think is definitely worth checking out more than once a year.
Okay, so what else is happening at the ESPYs? Do you have anything else you can share about the event that night on Wednesday?
Just definitely tune in. It starts at 8 o'clock on ABC, and I think it's going to be I'm just looking forward to Dick's speech most of all, honestly, but I think it's going to be one of those fun nights where we can celebrate all the great things that have happened in sports all year long, and have a moment to reflect, and have a moment just to sort of hear from Dick, hear what's going on with him, and I think it's going to be a really moving evening. And
if people do want to help the V Foundation, you want to tell people how they can do that?
Definitely. Please visit v.org/donate, 100% of your donation will go to cancer research. And if you can't donate, please just surf around on V.org. Read more about the research we fund, more about the people who are surviving their cancers because of research. It's a great website to check out.
Katie Sweet is the Senior Director of Brand Communications at the V Foundation. Thanks for taking the time today. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Okay, you'll be able to watch the ESPYs on ABC, 8 o'clock on Wednesday night. I want to tell you a quick Stuart Scott story since I was thinking about that, knowing she was coming on. So when I worked with him, he was sick. Like that, and he had really scaled back his television appearances at that point. I mean, he was a mainstay, obviously, on the night sports centers forever. And by the time that I had gotten around to working there, he had already gotten sick. And I'm not even sure it was totally public at the time. We knew internally. And I'll never forget this because like how she put like Dick Vitale's a machine, he would turn it on. And I can tell funny stories about how Dick Vitale isn't that personality that you see on TV. He turns that on. It's it's pretty bizarre.
Stephen A. It's the same thing.
He turns it on.
Yeah,
He's actually like, he doesn't talk to everybody like that all the time. He's not like constantly Dickie V, but when the lights go on, he becomes Dickie V. I saw Stuart Scott do this too, and it was really one of the most unbelievable things I've ever seen. I was on one of the night sports centers on a, some random night, and he was going to be the co-anchor. And, typically we meet, if we were doing an 11 o'clock show, we'd meet at like 6 p.m. and Stuart wasn't there. And that wasn't that unusual and considering who he is. And
right. Yeah.
He doesn't need to be.
doesn't need the run.
He won't be. He won't need to be there. Anyway, 8 o'clock rolls around. Things are now changing. Games are going on. We're flipping the rundown around. Typically, we're all in communication because, what we planned on doing, which never happens because, things are changing. We're flipping around and he's still not there. 9:30 rolls around. We're going on the air at 11. That's typically when I go down to makeup. Haven't seen him yet. And I asked him, is he okay? Because we all knew, I don't know if publicly people knew he was sick, but we all knew he was sick. And the producers were like, Stuart's, taking it easy down in his office and we're in contact with him. He'll be up, soon. 10:15 rolls around. I get back up to the desk. I've had makeup put on. I'm all dressed up to go on the air. They're handing me scripts, initial highlights of games that are done.
Yeah.
No Stuart.
Still no Stuart.
Haven't seen him. So I'm like, now I'm like, am I doing this show alone? Or is someone else coming in here? And no, he's fine. Don't worry about it. He's totally fine. 10:45, 10:50, something like that. Stuart's fully dressed, looks like death. I mean, just doesn't look right. I never had this. I don't know what this is like, but he just looks like he can barely move. He's like barely walking. He's sauntering. The blood's out of his face. He looks terrible. I mean, awful. And I hadn't really worked with him much, and he's a legend. And I'm like looking at him, and I'm like, I just said to him, I'm like, whatever you don't feel like doing, if it's just some dumb little throwaway bump or something like that, just tell me, I'll do it. Just whatever. And he's like, thanks, I'll be fine. I'm telling you, at 11 o'clock when they turned on that camera, you would have never known. I mean, it was full on, exactly cooler than the other side of the pillow, with the same level of energy, effort. It was him. All of a sudden, it just popped out. And for an hour, you would never, ever, ever have known anything was wrong with him. The second that show ended, I thought he was going to pass out. He needed an IV. Or someone was going to have to literally help him walk out of the studio. And he was doing that night after night. They'd scaled him back, so he was only doing 2 or 3 shows a week tops because they knew he couldn't handle it. But it was amazing. I mean, I really... Talk about perseverance. And he didn't want to talk about it. He didn't want anybody to know, and he didn't want any sympathy. And he just did his job the way he did it. And I don't think I've ever worked with anybody that did something like that before. It was incredible. The second it was over, I swear I thought they were taking him by ambulance to the hospital. Before it, I was like, you're not going to get through this. Yeah. He looked dehydrated. He looked sickly. He looked like he was going to pass out. He looked like he was going to. He looked like he was going to throw up. I couldn't believe it. And then they turned that camera on, and Snoop Dogg. You would have never known. Never, ever would have known. And it was flawless, and it was the same energy you're accustomed to with him. And he could turn it on for an hour. It was unbelievable. Anyway, all right, ESPYs this Wednesday. All right, we'll get back into Juan Soto in a little bit and the preemptive Deshaun Watson, I will sue you if you suspend me stuff next. Brave Watch the Show, ESPN 630 Sports Capital.